Thank you. I move private members' business item number 1896, standing in my name. I've brought this matter to the attention of the House because I'm concerned that this dispute has dropped off the radar. Unless, of course, you are suffering with a mental illness and needing treatment in a public hospital. And waiting perhaps in an emergency department at Westmead. Internal figures disclosed by Four Corners show that this March, a mentally ill 19-year-old waited more than 3 days for treatment. And in April, 3 men with severe mental health conditions waited between 80 and 93 hours for treatment. Or perhaps you're seeking help in a community setting, waiting for yet another locum doctor and having to repeat your psychiatric history over and over again with predictable and damaging results. Or an intern or resident hoping to specialise in psychiatry and struggling to get the guidance and mentoring from a staff psychiatrist that specialist training should involve. Or a young doctor facing difficult issues without a staff psychiatrist to reach out to, because these are the groups most directly affected by this ongoing dispute. And of course, those vocational psychiatrists committed to public care but exhausted by the delay and the disrespect of this government. This dispute is almost as old as this government. The Australian Medical Association, the Royal Australian and New Zealand College of Psychiatrists and the Australian Salaried Medical Officers Federation urgently sought a meeting with the Minister for Mental Health in October 2 years ago. But this request was not met with any haste. In fact, the only urgency that is obvious in this dispute is the urgency with which New South Wales Health appears to be trying to recruit replacement psychiatrists from overseas. And given the huge differentials between Queensland salaries and New South Wales salaries, not to mention Western Australian salaries and our own, one wonders whether we will be attracting the best candidates. Let me play Nostradamus for a minute. I foresee that the government will rise, not address the delay occasioned by their inaction, not address the real impact on some of our most vulnerable, our public psychiatric patients, and blame our wages cap. Can I say that this avoidance of responsibility, this blame shifting, is getting old? The wages cap had nothing to do with this dispute being pushed to the bottom of the pile by this government, so that there was no serious engagement by the minister in this government until almost half the staff psychiatrists were on the point of walking away. The wages cap has nothing to do with this government's attitude to mental health, which in their workers' compensation bill sees psychological damage as having to reach a much higher threshold than physical damage before ongoing support for appropriate care is warranted. The wages cap was not a factor in staff shortages, which led to wards being opened and closed and general community uncertainty, with reports of some services being closed and later found to be actually functioning. The wages cap had no bearing on the delay in the Industrial Relations Commission, including the government's decision to use counsel who could not make themselves available before the 19th of June. That is 3 months after the arbitration hearing began, delayed once by the government not being ready to discuss the psychiatrist's economic modelling, and delayed again for months by the diary of the government's counsel. This government needs to take responsibility for this dispute and take responsibility for resolving it expeditiously, because people are hurting. The New South Wales budget is hurting, with costs that the Minister has been unable to quantify, and the costs, of course, being borne by our psychiatric patients. At estimates, the Minister for Mental Health was unable to quantify the cost to the budget of the additional locum payroll to fill some staff positions. But yesterday, she announced that the cost of meeting the recruitment and retention allowance sought by psychiatrists had been costed at $700 million. That is more than 23 times higher than the cost which her ministry representatives provided to the IRC. And when questioned about the difference, apparently it's to do with apples. Well, I wouldn't like to be shopping at her fruit shop if she imposes a unilateral 2,020% increase and either can't or won't explain why, except by some Delphic reference to fruit. And if we are thinking about comparative cost, at the ministry's figures of a shade over $32 million, that's the equivalent of New South Wales supporting 6 UFC matches. I know where I would prefer my tax dollars to be spent. The people of New South Wales deserve better, our mentally ill deserve respect, and we need this dispute resolved urgently.
Thank you.